Hello, and welcome once again to Denton's Tales. The Volur, Shamans of the Vikings. Well, that's not actually correct. No. They were the shamans of the Norse people, yes, but not the Vikings. No, since a Viking was an occupation. It was something that one did, not something that one was. But the story of the Volur is a fascinating one, though not the sum total of magic among the Old Norse. In this video, I will be looking at the overall practice of magic in the Viking Age, though principally at the Volur, which is the plural or the Volva singular. Women who were very important in Old Norse society. Oh yes, they had an influence. An influence felt in agriculture, trade, matters of the health or wealth, in war, on the farm, well, in just about every aspect of the daily life that you can think of in the Scandinavian lands. They were female shamans, seers, or you can call them seeresses if you wish, though seer as a term is applicable to both male and female, simply meaning one who sees something. It isn't gender specific. And they practiced a form of magic known as seer. You could also, I suppose, see them as witches, minus the ridiculous popular image, of course, of the black cat, the pointy hat, and the broomstick, which even real witches never actually used, since traditional witchcraft incorporates some aspects of what the Nordic women did. Now, to fans of the Vikings television show, hardly a bastion of historical truth. Indeed, just about everything in it is wrong. The mention of a seer, now that probably brings to mind an ancient, desiccated and blind individual, somewhat resembling an animated Egyptian mummy. But that's wrong on two counts. Firstly, there was absolutely no requirement for a seer to be blind, since though blindness was always regarded as improving the other senses, hearing, smell, and so on, which indeed it does, it was not a requirement for magic. Not in the slightest. Nor was it necessary for a seer to look as if they'd just been resurrected out of a tomb in the Valley of the Kings. And secondly, the seer in the television show is a man. Yes, though under all that makeup, it might be rather hard to tell. The Volur were almost exclusively women, and had the seer of Kattegat been a man, well, he would hardly have been regarded with the great respect and reverence shown in the TV series. In fact, he would probably have been jeered by many people for reasons I'll come to later, and he would probably have given young children nightmares. I mean, imagine meeting him on a dark night, I ask you. The term Volva means a wand carrier, or one who bears a staff, deriving from a word meaning a staff. Since a wand or staff was the symbol of these women, frequently the distaff used in spinning, and examples of these have been found in graves across Scandinavia. The thumbnail to this video shows a very fine modern replica of a Volva's staff, and I'm indebted to my friend Andrea Allman, who had it made and gave me permission to use it. Thank you very much, Andrea. Practitioners of Seder were known as Seidkone, or Seder woman, or Seid Morder, Seder man. Not that there were very many of those, and were also referred to as Sporkone, meaning prophecy women, coming from spore, prophecy, and kona, woman, since that was part of their abilities to look into the future and make prophecies. Now, the first Volva was said to be none other than the goddess Freya herself, she having brought that magic to Asgard, or Asgard as it is in English, when she joined the Aesir gods there. The practice said to have been common enough among the Vanir gods, of which she was a member, but pretty much unknown among the Aesir. That, I suppose, gave the Volur an added position of respect among the people, since their art was from the great goddess herself. Yes, a direct link, you might say, between the gods of Asgard and the humans of Midgard. Something that, well, in itself, I suppose, set them apart, regardless of anything they might actually do. And even Odin himself sought out a dead Volva to obtain information from her, travelling down to Hel on his great 8-legged horse Sleipnir to consult her. While possessing aspects of witchcraft, Seidr was not witchcraft as such as we might see it. It was a shamanic form of magic, especially associated with the Old Norse peoples, that frequently involved the study of fate. Yes, and working within that to not only understand it, but also alter it, if possible, sometimes symbolically weaving a new set of events on a loom, twisting and altering the strand. It combined magic rituals and divination, much of it performed in an altered state of consciousness, even involving the practitioner going into a trance-like state to connect with spirits from whom they could get the information they desired, induced by drumming, music, or hallucinogenic substances such as henbane, and the singing of what were called a magic tune. And as I've already alluded to, it was closely associated with spinning and weaving. In fact, the name Seidr means a thread, strings, or a cord. That is also closely associated, of course, with the three Norns, who were incorrectly seen as weaving the fate of the world as they sat beneath the great tree of life, Yggdrasil. Well, actually, in fact, they didn't weave anything at all. No, they carved it on sticks. No weaving, just carving. But that part of Seidr involved changing individual destiny by altering the weave, if you like, on the womb, moving the threads of the web of destiny around to produce a different outcome, good or bad, depending on the circumstances required. Knowledge of creating or changing something like destiny could be used either way, for good or for bad. There was nothing good or bad about the art itself, but the use of it could go either way. Magic in itself was neither good nor bad. It was just magic. And it was the practitioners of it who decided if the use was beneficial or harmful. And of course, that applies today as well. I mean, a blessing or a curse is basically the same thing insofar as what is required to send it is concerned. Sending it is the same. What you do with it is a different matter. Seidr could be applied to virtually any aspect of people's lives, and some of its benefits still exist, of course, in modern shamanism in various countries. It was a form of magic that could give blessings or tell the future. It could help to cure the sick. It could assist the growing of crops and even bring good weather, influence the behavior of animals, a person's destiny. It could be changed for the better, often by a Volva weaving a better fate on a symbolic trance-induced loom, much as the Norns did for the fate of people in general. There were many great benefits to be obtained from it, making those who practiced it, very respected and honoured and relied on by communities, greatly relied on, in fact. And many communities, of course, would call on their services. And, as I've said, their practices came from the gods themselves. Oh, yes, they came from the gods. You couldn't really argue with that, could you? I mean, gods. But, as in most magic beliefs that have been followed down the ages, it was twofold. It could be used for great benefit and provide assistance and help to people, but there's always a but. But on the other hand, it had another side, like the yin and yang. There were two parts to it, and it could also do the exact opposite. Or it could bring curses, cause illnesses, kill livestock, cause injury, or even death. Yes, even death, especially in battle, and give false prophecy, so people would consult it and then make the wrong decisions. And just as someone's fate could be improved by weaving, so too could it be made a great deal worse by the same method. A Volva could influence people, weaving them into going to war, for example. Now, not all Volva were nice, kind people, I suppose. I mean, they were human, after all, so it goes without saying that they would not all be wonderfully 100% angelic people. And no doubt they were subject to anger if insulted or not recompensed sufficiently for their services. So people were very careful not to upset them or interfere with them. Oh, yes, so that a Volva using her magic in an unacceptable way was truly believed in. It's shown by the fact that in Iceland, love poems, those things so dear to the first Volva, Freyja, were actually banned. Yes, they were banned since a spell, you see, could be secretly placed in them. Yes, and it could force someone to love a person against their will. You couldn't have funny stuff like that going on now, could you? A Volva was essentially a seer, a sorcerer. Again, that term is actually also non-gender specific, meaning one who practices sorcery, male or female. A person who could discover answers from the spirits, sometimes called a knowing woman for that reason, and often travelling around from hall to hall or village to village with her wand, performing her seidr magic in return for food and lodging and other forms of compensation. A Volva was both respected and feared during the Viking Age, and no doubt for centuries before that. Greatly respected for her wisdom and the great benefits she could bestow, and equally feared for the opposite things that she might also bestow if she was offended. And for that reason, well, they were able to travel even at night, alone and unarmed, anywhere in perfect safety. Well, no one was going to dare to touch her. I mean, nobody wanted the crops to fail, or the cattle to die, or they'd come out in warts or something. And when she would visit a hall, the owner, be he a powerful jarl or even the king, would give up his seat to her. Oh yes, he'd give up his seat, giving her the seat of honour in the hall and serving her the finest mead or wine and the most succulent of food, even preparing special dishes just for her alone, as we shall see in a moment. I should imagine that being a Volva was rather pleasant, actually. One could rely on the best of board and lodgings and be deferred to even by the great and the good, rather like movie stars or other celebrities today. And much like many of our celebrities now, Volva didn't sell her services at rock-bottom prices. No, definitely. No, she didn't give freebies, not by a long way. And she expected to be well paid or recompensed in other suitable ways. Volva graves usually contain items that suggest wealth or status, something that shows they probably didn't do charity work. No, I'd say they didn't do that sort of thing. In the saga of Eric the Red, we get a quite interesting account of a Volva, where she is described as wearing a long blue cloak with stones set in it all the way down to the hem, a necklace of glass beads, and a headdress of black lambskin trimmed with white cat hair. She wore a belt made of amadon, a spongy material that was used to make a form of sort of artificial leather, and from it hung a bag which contained the various tools that she needed to perform the seidr. She wore shoes of calf skin with brass knobs on the ends of the laces, and gloves made of catskin, white and fluffy on the inside, and she carried a staff with a knob on the end, trimmed with brass and set with stones. The catskin, incidentally, would have been lynx, not house cat. When she entered the hall, she was greeted with great reverence by all those present, or conveyed to the high seat of honour, and served only dishes that had been cooked especially for her, including something made from the hearts of every kind of animal they possessed, and porridge made from young goat's milk. The following day, she performed the dance, standing up. Oh yes, standing up on a special platform, something that is mentioned frequently. Volva being up on something, a chair or a scaffold or a ladder, and she is surrounded by young women who sing special sacred songs that would summon the powers that the Volva wish to communicate with. Another thing that is mentioned quite often, singing and chanting to help establish a link with the spirit. And as I mentioned, the magic tune. Beautiful sounds that would please and attract the spirits, and it seems that in this case it was all a great success, and the Volva saw far ahead into the future. The so-called magic tune is also reminiscent of another form of Norse magic called Golder, which I'll come to shortly. The magic scene in the saga of Eric the Red is similar to an incident in the life of the famous Gudrid the Far Traveller, so named because that remarkable woman crossed the North Atlantic 8 times. Yes, 8 times in a longship, and that's some journeys, I can tell you. As well as going on foot right across Europe on a pilgrimage to Rome, walking from Denmark to Italy. She had come to adulthood in the time Iceland converted to Christianity. in the year 1000 AD. That conversion, it would seem, for reasons of expediency rather than any actual piety. And trade, which was, far more important than any religious convictions. If you can't sell things, you can't trade. It doesn't really matter what you believe in. You're not going to do very well. And though raised a pagan, Gudrid followed the popular trend and converted to the new faith. One winter night, she and her father and some companions were feasting at the home of a man called Thorkel, who was presumably still a pagan, when he was visited by a seeress, a Volva, named Thornbjorg, who was intended to perform pagan magic, something that was becoming more rare in Iceland with the arrival of the new faith, of course, and would become very dangerous later on when the church took over full control of all religious affairs. So you have to be very careful then. Specifically, Thornbjorg wanted to perform what were known as ward songs, for which she, like the Volur in the saga of Eric the Red, needed the women present to assist her by forming a circle and chanting, helping her to contact the spirits she required. Gudrid, however, was the only woman present who knew these magic songs, or perhaps the only one who, given the changing times, wanted to admit to actually knowing them, which could have been a sensible thing, one must admit, which she had learned as a girl from her foster mother, Halidis. But she wasn't at all happy. No, the church frowned on such things very, very, very considerably, telling Thornbjorg, "These are the sort of actions in which I intend to take no part, because I am a Christian woman." But her father and Thorkel managed to persuade her, you see, that performing the chants would be beneficial for the other people present. Yes, it would be a nice thing to do. It would be, well, being nice and kind to other people, that would be a Christian thing to do, wouldn't it, So, just a bit of chanting. I mean, chanting you didn't even believe in anyway. Well, I mean, that wouldn't hurt her Christian status, would it? It's a white lie, but it seems to have done the trick. Thus, reassured, Gudrid performed the pagan songs with considerable skill, and the other women sat in a circle around the Volva, who afterwards praised Gudrid for her rendition of the songs, never having heard them performed so beautifully. And she said that the spirits, too, had been very, very pleased with such a lovely performance. So everybody went home happy, and Gudrid's faith was undamaged, for which I'm sure we all give thanks. But these two accounts show that for at least some Seder magic, the participation of others was required. It wasn't just a solo act. You needed some other people. What today, I suppose, we might call a backing group. A Volva could also go to war. Oh yes, accompanying an army to provide magic assistance. But it was seen as women's work. Oh, very, very definitely this was a feminine occupation, though, well, there were a few men who practiced the art because of its association with women and the possibility that women's clothing actually played a part in the rituals, and men might have to dress accordingly. Well, men who practiced the art ran the risk of being considered, well, a bit less than manly, and even being persecuted. For example, during the Christianization of Norway, the Seder men particularly annoyed King Olaf Tryggvason. Not that he liked pagans for that matter, and he was rather easily annoyed anyway. But men doing women's work, oh no, that really pissed him off. It pissed him off so much. Pagan men doing women's work, it really took his level of pissed offness right to the limit. And he had the Seder men bound and tossed onto a rocky outcrop in the sea at low tide, there to drown very slowly as the tide came back in, just to show everyone how really pissed off he was about it. Oh yes, he was mightily pissed off. Methods like that, of course, greatly assisted his efforts to convert his subjects to the new faith. Getting baptized was considerably better than the alternative if King Olaf was around. The really amusing thing, of course, about that attitude to male Volur is that the most famous man to practice Seder was hardly one that anyone could have seen as even a tiny bit unmanly or effeminate, being none other than Odin himself. Yes, Odin, who was taught it by Freya at his own request. But even he, the great god who ruled over the 9 realms, suffered the accusations of being unmanly as a result. It was a bit ridiculous, really, wasn't it? I mean, Loki, for example, accused him of being ergi, that is to say that he was unmanly, cowardly, and would accept the female role in sexual intercourse. Yeah, he'd be on the bottom. Yes, you see, personally, if I lived in an age where great, heroic, manly prowess was so greatly admired, and I knew a man who went around on a massive 8-legged horse that could even run on water and fly through the air, accompanied by a pair of giant wolves, and carried a spear that when he threw it, couldn't miss what he threw it at, and then returned back to his hand. I'd be very slow to tell him he wasn't manly. Even if he was wearing a blonde wig with pretty little curls in it, a pink dress covered in flowers, and was sitting on the floor playing with dolls. No way, Jose. Given all that, I don't think the seer from Vikings would have been overly popular in Kattegat. He most certainly wouldn't have been held in high regard by everyone in the town as he's shown in the TV series. Having a woman in the part would have been much more accurate historically, and I suppose if they wanted her for some best reason known to themselves to look as though they'd got her out of a glass case in the Cairo Museum, well they could have, buried her under a ton of makeup just the same. I actually worked with John Kavanagh, who plays the seer in Vikings in Dublin's Abbey Theatre back in the early 1970s, by the way. He looked a lot different when I saw him. In part 2, I will be looking at both Seder and other forms of Norse magical practice, such as the aforementioned Golder and Sita Ute. So, until we come to the next video, I shall say goodbye for now, and I hope you enjoyed this one.